This is an RNZ podcast.
They say it takes a village to raise a child. I'm Catherine Ryan, and here we draw on my conversations with experts on 9 to Noon to help you navigate family life. Well, now an exploration of the simple shifts that are possible for parents in order to feel happier in their day-to-day family lives. Not by doing more, but by doing things a little bit differently. Our guest is the former lead editor of the New York Times Motherlode blog, Dell'Antonia. Over the years, she's asked and answered many questions about parenting, but she says she was most intrigued by this one. Why isn't it any fun? So, drawing from the latest research and interviews with families, she wrote a book about it called How to Be a Happier Parent. She's here with some advice on how to make family life with a refuge and pleasure, and what we can change and what can get in the way of that change. KJ, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I think we're speaking to you from one of your son's last hockey games.
Well, things got a little haywire, so I'm still in my home office, but I'm hoping to make it to the to the third period. Probably.
You see, now I'm feeling guilty already. Is that a good place to start?
Oh, no, and I don't. I see plenty of hockey games. I'll be watching multiples this weekend, so it's all good. That's one way to be happier. You don't have to go to every game.
Good for you. Let's begin by challenging guilt. You've got 4 children yourself, as I've alluded to, and you've had this experience of the interaction with readers over all these years. How common was that question? I'm simply not enjoying this. Why not?
Well, it just seemed to be pervasive. When I took over the Motherlode blog at the New York Times in 2012, I began reading. I was reading essays. I was reading research studies. I was on top of all the different pieces of policy and everything that was sort of happening out there. And what I was just feeling was this pervasive sense that we were all feeling like this parenting thing was such a slog. And I'm not excluding myself from that. I was right in the middle of it. I do have 4 kids, and every day we would just get up and sort of put our skates on and start frantically trying to, get our full-time jobs and our kids and their school and to all their many, many activities. And it just felt so stressful. And I just wanted to explore, why were we? I didn't remember my own parents feeling that way, and I wanted to ask why were we feeling that way, and most importantly, how could we make it stop?
Is expectation a big factor? Do people come in with rose-tinted glasses sometimes, despite the way people share things? Do we still inevitably start thinking it's going to be something that it's probably not going to be?
Well, there is some interesting research out there that suggests that parents who had really high expectations of family life and of what kind of parent they would be are the ones that are most likely to suffer from real and true burnout, which is a little bit different from being actually unhappier. But so the answer is yes. When we have high expectations of ourselves and what the experience will be like, and that every moment will be, rainbows with unicorns leaping over them, then we are more likely to feel not just stressed when things are stressful, but unhappy about it as well.
Which stage of parenting was this most common? Was there an age or a stage where children were getting to where this became particularly prominent?
I wouldn't say that there's a particular age where it's prominent. What I found is that the ways that happier parents interacted with their children varied from age to age. So if you have parents of younger children who describe themselves as happier, or more satisfied with their parenting life, feeling pretty good at it, which is how academics measure parental happiness, they tend to be a little more involved. They're, more in it on a day-to-day basis, spending a little more time with their kids, taking they're sort of down on their hands and knees a little bit more. But as children get older, parents who describe themselves as happier report being less involved, encouraging their kids to do things on their own that they can do. So, for example, they might take more of a backseat for homework. They might ask their kids to make more of their own arrangements or expect more of them in the way of chores.
Let's look at your 10 mantras for happier parents. You get into that quite early in the book. What are some of the straight out, tried and tested lessons you've learned from this?
Oh, gosh. One that have been particularly reliant on of late. My kids are 12, 13, 14, and 17. And one of the things that I have learned over the years is that I don't have to go in there. That's it's an inside family joke, meaning one of our kids used to have temper tantrums in her closet regularly, and we would look at each other and say, "Are you going in there?" "I'm not going in there." And I realized eventually that I didn't have to go in there in a much larger sense, that when your child is really, losing her squash about something, whether it's something really quite serious or something kind of minor, you don't have to emotionally go in there with the child. And it's actually better for both of you if you don't. So you can, it's another mantra, and I guess a couple of them come up here, but you can be happier when your child is not, odd as that sounds. And it's better for you because you can get some emotional distance from whatever's happening. And it's really better for them not to feel like, in addition to being responsible for their own moods and happiness, they're also responsible for ours.
That's very wise words. It's sometimes easier said than done. I mean, one
trick
much. Sometimes
yes, I make it sound like I'm...
Of course. One trick...
I do. I totally make it sound like this is easy, and it's not.
Sometimes when something spectacular is happening, that often does, the sort of the adolescent or the teenage scream fest is happening, or the kids are screaming with each other. I mean, there's no harm in having a quiet snigger at it, really, is it? It's life. It's just perhaps not in a way that's going to make them worse, but just laugh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's often really kind of funny and also kind of joyful. I mean, there you are, and there are these kids that presumably you wanted very much, and they're being supremely annoying at whatever they're doing, or they're, stomping around emptying the dishwasher as loudly as any human being could possibly do it. And you're just, chuckling to yourself and just noting that actually this is not really these are not bad times, these times with these annoying children.
Everything is operating as it should, perhaps except the dishwasher. Allied to that, if you see something, don't always say something. This can be a challenge, isn't it? That need to either resolve or commentate on what you've observed.
Yes, and that's another one I really wrestle with. And here's an interesting sort of side of it, which is that often you find that you're harping at one child in particular frequently. Like there's and then at least in our family, it switches from child to child. But I will often realize that, all of my interactions with a particular child on a particular day have been of the, put your shoes away, pick up the towel. You didn't put your backpack in the cubby. We're late. You're making us, have been of that variety. And when you start to feel that, that's an especially great time to start saying, okay, I see it, but this time I'm not going to say it. Is it annoying that, same scenario, child emptying the dishwasher while muttering under their breath about, how horrible it all is that they have to empty the dishwasher. You don't have to say anything. That's okay. They can do that. It's all good.
What you want now isn't always what you want later. This is interesting too, because this is kind of the inverse. This is where if you don't make the effort now, you may end up paying the price.
That's right. And this is also a hard one. And it's true in so many areas. Let me tell you what would be super easy. So like, say you have a second grader, it would be super easy for you to just help her unpack her homework, do that math for her. This is no problem. Or just sit down and just make sure that it's all right. And then get it tucked back up in the backpack and all ready to go tomorrow. And pack up her lunch and get out what she's going to wear tomorrow. And just, you can make sure that everything goes super smoothly for you and that child. But the result is a child who, isn't necessarily doing their own addition, doesn't know how to pack up their backpack, hasn't felt what it would be like if they get to school and they didn't bring back their homework, can't pick up their own outfit, can't make their own lunch. And it keeps going. We don't want to raise the child that's had everything done for them all of their life. We don't even want to raise the child who's been happy every minute. So as hard as it is, the things that would make your life easier now are often just, they're not what you want in the long run.
Which brings us to another of the key points. Decide what to do, then do it. The second guessing, the overthinking, the weighing up, if I say yes to this, can I say no to that? Is what you're suggesting here. Sometimes just decisively saying what's going to happen is actually enough for the child. They'll probably continue arguing the toss and comparing. But that decision and sticking by it's what counts.
Yeah, and so that applies in a couple of ways. I mean, if you're the kind of parent who says things, and I am, like, if you don't put your shoes on right this minute, we're not going to the park, and they don't put their shoes on, guess what? You're not going to the park. So, standing by what you said is part of it. And then just, making a decision. When your child says, can I do such and such? Give them an answer and don't second guess it. Don't let whining change your mind. And if you get it wrong, well, you'll probably get another chance tomorrow. It's not a big deal. That's another mantra. You're not even supposed to get this right every time. So as a parent, just making the adult decision and then just getting on with whatever comes next is really useful. It's useful in the rest of life, too.
Sure. You do you, I think, is important. And this happens, and it can happen at various phases of parenting, where you're looking across at what friends are doing or so-and-so down the road is doing, and you feel we need to be matching this. Someone else is dictating what you think your competence level is. Does this cause a lot of unhappiness?
Or you want to. It does. I mean, it gets to the social media question often as well, where, you look over, I was recently at a party, and don't get the idea that I go to parties like this this was the first time this has ever happened, but we're at this party and my family is there and there are a couple of other families there. And the hostess of the party, produces her guitar, and her daughter, who's a senior in high school, produces her guitar. And they lead us all in a lovely sing-along with the two of them who have beautiful voices and are playing the guitar. And, you just look at them and you think to yourself, I want to be the mother who plays guitar with my child. And I actually turned to my son and I was like, I really wish that we could do that, except neither of us wants to learn to play the guitar. And he was like, yeah. So that's important. That family, that's been a huge value for them their whole life. But they don't necessarily bake cupcakes every Tuesday. They don't necessarily play board games. I mean, I'm not saying I do those things either. But everybody does something cool, and you probably aren't even aware of what it is that you do. Maybe you're cooking a meal with your kids every night. Maybe you're constantly telling invented bedtime stories, or you're still reading aloud to kids that are older. Everybody's got a cool thing, but we can't all be raising our kids on a sailboat in the Pacific.
Which is interesting because you also say revel in the ordinary. And I think that comes back to sniggering quietly at the normality of behaviour, but revelling in the ordinary. Perhaps that's one of the reasons, again, coming back to the expectations that all these extraordinary experiences are going to be. Family life, in many ways, is about the ordinary and appreciating it.
Yeah. You gotta take the time to soak in the really good, ordinary, boring moments. This is actually something that I got from a lovely neuropsychologist that I interviewed. And it actually, it's great to just do it in the moment. It feels good to think about how good things are. But even more importantly, it trains your brain to look around at the good things instead of frantically searching for something that it can worry about. We're all familiar with that tendency of our minds to go straight to the worst possible outcome. Or, if you're laying in bed and you're awake at night, you just start down that road of what if this happens and what if that happens? There's a great saying, and I've heard it attributed to many, many people, but basically it amounts to, I have lived 1,000 tragedies, most of which never happened. And we do that to ourselves. So if we can remind our brains just to appreciate when things are good, first of all, we can keep ourselves from going down those roads when we don't have to. But we also get a little protection for the moments when things aren't good. And that's going to happen. I mean, that happens to all of us. Everyone gets that phone call where all you really want is for your biggest problem to be the fact that your toddlers are squabbling in the backside of the seat of the car.
That's a very valid point. I think the other thing is, and it comes back yet again to expectations, it's hard. It's testing. It requires sacrifice. It means you can't always do the things that you wanted to do before you had kids. And, is that perspective that this is part of the whole package something people need to get themselves to?
Yeah, it's easier if you accept the ways that things are going to be different, that things are going to be challenging, that you're not going to be able to, do everything that you want at the minute that you wanted to, which maybe you could as a young childless adult, and maybe you couldn't. But it's also really important to note that we are in a moment in Western culture where we tend to assume it's going to be even harder, that it has to be even harder than it necessarily does. We are in a really huge overparenting moment. So some of the time we're making sacrifices that we, don't need to be making. I mean, you mentioned feeling bad at the beginning of this that I was missing my son's hockey game. And I do feel a little bad because it's just the last of I don't, because I'm going to see part of it, but it's the last of them. And I will get there. My point is, I don't have to be at every game. I have not been at every game. I don't feel one bit bad about not having been to every game. Sometimes, when I am at those little peewee hockey games or with my younger kids, I'm there, sure. But if you look closely, I have earbuds in my ears. I'm listening to a podcast, and I'm knitting because that's what I like to do. I used to read, but people definitely gave me the side eye for that one. Do your own thing some of the time. We don't have to give up everything for these kids. We got to give up some. And, doing that with grace and pleasure because it's what we wanted, that makes us happier. But keeping our own lives and our own selves going, even when our kids have things, that they might prefer that we were doing, that makes us happier too.
It's interesting we started with guilt. Perhaps that's where we should end as well. Drop it. Thank you. KJ Dell'Antonia. The book is How to Be a Happier Parent.